All right, so we are COMP213. It's web interface design, and it's week 8, lesson 8, part 1, right? And my name is Tom. I'm going to be replacing Joanne, like I said, for the next several weeks until the end of semester. So again, I work with a Mac environment, but just because of that, I can always switch to Windows, not a problem. And again, previously you guys have been using Expression Web. That's fine. I'm not going to say no to it. However, there are really cool modern tools that do a lot of the same kind of stuff, and I think I'd like to try and cover that little piece in the beginning of this first video that we're going to make together. And the first one, of course, would be, which I recommend, since it's on the computer in front of you, Visual Studio 2013. All right, so this is your standard way. Now, you might shake your head and say, I don't like Visual Studio, I don't like Microsoft, and that's totally cool. I'm an open source kind of guy too, right? So if you like open source stuff, all the power to you, I always say, right? But to me, I think I'd like to introduce you to all the major things. Microsoft Visual Studio 2013, 70 million lines of code. It's an excellent IDE, covers everything, has awesome IntelliSense, and we're going to use this primarily when I do my stuff for the videos throughout the lessons. However, you can choose to use whatever IDE is comfortable for you. In the last little while, I'm just on the Mac side again. On the last little while, I would say a couple of IDEs that are really become I would say prominent over the last while, or editors, is Brackets. Brackets is a great little developer tool for web design. As you can see, it says Code the Web. Again, I'm using Brackets for the Mac, but Brackets for Windows is just the same. How does this work? If I declare if it's a new folder, an example would this be? I'm switching out of this, aren't I? Okay, we're going to switch out of this in a second. When my next video will switch out. So let's say I declare a new folder, and here I'm just like it would be on the Windows side, and I'll do this both on Mac and Windows for you. So let's say, for example, it's my new project, and I'll call it my web app. Okay. So let's say I want this, and I want to kind of work with my web app. It's a drag and drop environment. So there's my web app right here, and if I want to kind of include a new file, as an example, like index.html. I can certainly include index.html and then start coding my HTML document from scratch, right? So if I was HTML5, a lot of the automatic features are here as well, where I can start coding stuff, tags and so on from scratch. Like for example, my doc type. If I was going to type doc type HTML as an example, that would be the first piece. My outer code would be HTML, and I would have a head section and a body section, right? These are the structure of HTML5, right? So this kind of stuff I could code certainly from scratch, and it gives you some kind of code hinting and so on. Great code hinting. One of the most popular IDEs right now out there for web coding, Brackets, and it's free. They usually come from Adobe. They used to call it Adobe Code, but what's happened is Brackets has become an open source, or free, sorry, I can't say open source, free product that you can download and install. So definitely one thing I would recommend. Let's just get out of this. One other thing that which is very popular, is Sublime Text, right? So if you're a Sublime Text person, I think this is a great tool as well. Sublime, and again, there's different versions. This is Sublime Text 2 that I've got going on. But more or less, it looks very similar to Brackets and works very similar way. If I just drag and drop in Sublime, all of a sudden I have my Sublime text with my index.html. I didn't save it, but that's how it would be. So a drag and drop environment. Nice. One of the newer ones, which I also recommend you take a look at, I wonder if I have it here, is Visual Studio Code. That is something that's available for Microsoft cross-platform. It works on Linux, Mac, and Windows. And it looks very much like Visual Studio, except it doesn't have the bulkiness of Visual Studio, the ability for you to create everything from scratch and so on. It's kind of a newer little IDE that comes available to you via download. You can download this thing again on any platform, and it's free to use. All right, so this right now it's in preview form, but Microsoft is saying that they're going to make it cross-platform and free. Again, for us, what we're going to be using is this big, crazy editor called, as soon as this thing stops flashing, Visual Studio. Right? And how do we start off? So if you were join me, if you have Visual Studio in front of you, you should. Yeah. This is, by the way, this is a hands-on thing. I don't want you to watch. I want you to do. right? So if you haven't logged in already, log in and join me on Visual Studio. Okay, so we're going to do a new project. Let's click New Project, right? And now you might see a few things different on mine than yours, but it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, I'm pretty much the same as you in terms of my options. Under language choice, I'm going to choose Visual C#. If Visual C# isn't your default choice, for example, if you have other languages, like if your machine is set up for Visual Basic for some reason or another, right? It would certainly come up here. So here's Visual Basic. Visual Studio supports all kinds of languages. Visual Basic, it supports Visual C++, Visual F#, and so on. Again, it doesn't really matter, but for me, what I'd like you to go to is Visual C#. Under Visual C#, there's another folder called Web, and underneath there is an ASP.NET web application, which is where I want you to start. Okay, so on the bottom, you might see some other options that I don't have. I'm just going to unclick this for a second. You should see the following: the name of the project, so Web Application 4, right? In this particular case, yours might be different. I'm going to change this in a second. You'll have a location on your computer where this is going to go. I'm putting it in something called Projects for now, and I can choose to move this to someplace else. But this is perfectly fine, right? Obviously, your location is going to be different. You can choose to put it on the desktop. You can choose to put it on your own personal drive. You can choose to put it wherever you like. Okay. Okay, cool. So let's rename this thing because I'd like to try and rename this for what we're doing. So it's COMP213. That's what this lesson is called, and it's going to be called Lesson 8, and then it's Part 1. Okay, so that's the one thing we're going to be doing together. Lesson 8, Part 1. What I'm also going to do for you, now you don't have to do this because you guys are kind of beginners, is I'm also going to kick off something called a new Git repository. Who knows anything about Git and what Git is? You shouldn't by now. It's not just storage. It's absolutely true. You can store your files. So it's not just for storage. It's actually used for version control more than anything else, right? Or revision control. And I highly recommend you get a Git. Sorry, I know I'm behind it here. I'll step aside so you can see it all. I highly recommend you get a Git account, a GitHub account. It's a free account that you can get. You can sign up for free. I tend to store all my files there, and you can find any example files we do here in class. I will store them up on GitHub, so you can see exactly my code from the get-go. All right, this is what I will be doing, right? Now, how do you find me on GitHub? So before I continue, I'm just going to go on GitHub and just show you what it looks like. So this is where you can find my files. And by the way, I'll put these links on your eCentennial later today, right? So when we go back, you'll have all these links. So I'm going to go to github.com. This is where I would go, right? And when I go there, I'm logged in automatically as me, right? And what I'm going to show you is I'm going to create a new repository for our class for today. I'm going to go click New Repository. And underneath that, you're going to see the name. So my last name, which is the name of my repository, it's Tsiliopoulos, right? And now I'm going to call it what the name of our class today. So it's COMP213, and the same thing, Lesson 8, and then Part 1. So that's the name of my repository. I'm going to create a new repository here, right? And what this does is it gives me a little link for how I can connect to Visual Studio. Now, you don't have to follow along here at this point. I'm just making it so that you can access my link if you want to get my information to follow along with me when you're watching the video, if you choose to watch the video. So you can go to my GitHub account, and this is where it would be. It would be GitHub/Tsiliopoulos, which is my last name, COMP213-Lesson 8 Part 1. Now there's nothing there right now, but watch. I'm going to connect it. I'm going to copy this URI, and then when I go OK, let's step through this now. OK. If you go here, again, you have some options. I want you to choose the empty option for your project. Okay? Are you with me? I can go back. Can we go back? Let's go back. So what did I do? I was here, right? Web. I chose ASP.NET web application. I renamed it to COMP213 Lesson 8 Part 1, right? And then I pressed OK. All right. Now this icon, this checkbox or create directory for solution should be checked. But this one, for now, this other one is for me. I use it for my Git, but you don't have to have it checked. I'm going to press OK. And on the left, I'm going to choose empty for an empty solution. right? I don't want any of these checked down here whatsoever. And I don't want you checking anything like this if you're an Azure person, which you're probably not. And I'm going to press OK. When I do that, it's going to select and create an empty solution for me, right? So here's what you're going to see. You should see this. Yeah? The sign-in window just escaped from the sign-in. You shouldn't have to sign into Visual Studio for you to use it. I'll go around during break. I'll take a short break after this, and we'll go around and make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay, so if you're here with me now, right, I'm going to connect it to GitHub. So any changes I make here, you're going to see, you can reflect on GitHub. So if you can't follow along fast enough, if I'm too fast for you, you can always go to GitHub and say, where's this code? Oh, here it is, right, kind of thing. So let me do that. So I'm going to go to Team Explorer, and from here I'm going to go to Changes, and I'm going to say, this you don't have to do. Created new VS HTML5 projects. I'm just naming my commit. A commit, just from a GitHub perspective, is a snapshot of my files. Every time I make a change, I can create a commit, and what it does is create a snapshot of where my files exist today, right? So I'm going to commit, and then I'm going to go to Home and then click Unsync Commits, and this is where I'm going to put in my special URI. And if you can't go, don't worry if you can't go fast enough like this. If you ever want to do this on your own, you can always watch the video later on and try and kick this off by yourself. I'm going to click Publish, right? And then once I'm done that, if I go back to check out what's on GitHub, if I refresh my GitHub link, you can see that all my files are there. So you can always go down into my project, and you can see like what I have right now, which is nothing. I don't have anything in my project. So I'm just going to, again, this is my link, github.com. Tsiopoulos, my last name, right? COMP213, Lesson 8, Part 1. That's where you find it. And again, I'll publish my GitHub repository that you can always find. The way it would look for you would be like this. If I was to go into incognito mode, you'll see what it looks like. So I'm just going to kind of zap out of here for a second. And I'm just going to open a new incognito window. Who knows what an incognito window is with Chrome? By the way, I'm a Chrome user primarily, not Internet Explorer. God, no. And not Safari or Firefox. Although Safari and Firefox are both fine browsers. So let's go into New Incognito window here. And if you notice, I just right-clicked on Chrome and went to New Incognito window. And when I do that, it pulls up an incognito window that does not track what I do and doesn't cache anything, which is actually good from a testing perspective. So if I go here into www.github.com, I think that's it. And if I put in my last name, then I should see what you will see, which is this. This is my default look. Now you get my ugly picture. If you see my ugly picture, you're in the right place, right? And if you notice, if I look at repositories right now, if I click, there's a couple links here. One of them is contributors or contributions. Another one is repositories. If you click on repositories, yours would be the first one, because the latest repository is going to be on the top. And if you notice, it's updated 2 minutes ago. Okay, so this is where I'm looking right now. COMP213, Lesson 8, Part 1. Are you guys with me? Okay.
No, without 213, I don't know what happened.
No problem.
We'll
find it later. Yeah, so click on repositories for me.
Repository, oh.
This is a different link. There's a different tab on the top, right? If you click on repositories, you'll see COMP213.
Yes.
Lesson 8, Part 1. If you click on it, like this, it'll take you to this view, right? And that's the view that you should look at if you're going to follow along from a code perspective. Okay, let's go into it. So now let's try a couple things that you should already know how to do. Well, we are in Visual Studio, and I'm going to right-click on my project. There's two levels in Visual Studio, all right? There's this level out here, which is a solution level, right? And there's this level in here, which is the project level. Just like when you do when you did COMP100. Do you guys do COMP123 yet? Are you guys in the process of doing it right now? So it's the same thing, right? If you've done this, then you know you have Visual Studio. It's the editor of choice for us here at Centennial anyway, and this is the way it should be. So if you look at this, the solution level, if I want to add a new file to my solution, it's going to be at the project level. So I'm going to click Project, right-click onto it. I'm going to click Add, right? And if you notice, when you get this menu, you get a menu that says different things. One of the things I want you to add right now is an HTML page. Let's do that together. Let's add an HTML page. When you do that, I'm going to name my HTML page index, lowercase I, right? And I'm not, if you notice, I'm not putting an ending to it. I'm just putting index like this, right? And then press OK. How you doing? If I can get you to sign in, please. All right, so here's our index, and if you notice, I've got a regular doc type HTML, and if you notice, there's our HTML tag, and this big long thing, XMLNS, da 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 da, and you look at it and you're like, Tom, what the hell is that? You're gonna say, right? And you know, at the end of the day, for HTML5, you don't need this. So let's modify this for HTML5. Because remember, we're learning the most modern HTML5 here in this course, right? From web interface design. So let's wipe this out because you don't need this, right? And I want you to replace it with lang, right? And if you press enter, it'll say IntelliSense will give you some choices. What we want to use is English because we're English-speaking website right now. That's what we're making, right? Are you with me? Lang is equal to English, HTML5. All right, in the head document, in the head of the document, right, underneath the HTML tag, underneath the head tag, thank you, we're going to be putting in a meta tag. Now, do you guys know anything about meta tags? Meta tags, you all right? Yeah. Meta tags, what they do is they encode our HTML5 document to let the browser know certain other things about our page. For example, the character set we use, which should be UTF-8, is something we should definitely code in our page. I want you guys to do this every single time. So this is something I'm going to test you on later on, right? So when I say under the head of the document, because remember, we're coding it web from scratch here, right? I'm going to go meta. I'm going to start typing meta. And we're going to say character set. If you notice, see how Visual Studio is bringing it nicely up for me? We're using Visual Studio if you want to log in. Okay? And then if I look, there's a bunch of different kinds of character sets. I want to choose UTF-8 because UTF-8 is the most modern, or the one that works nicely with HTML5, right? And then I've closed off my meta tag. So this meta tag is super important when it comes to HTML5 because it reduces errors in the browser that we get from JavaScript and so on. All right, HTML5. Are you with me? Character set, UTF-8. I'm going to go slow because, again, it's a new tool. We're doing things a different way. And then, I want you guys to catch up, right? All right, so that's meta. Let's do one more meta tag. And it's one thing that we're going to be talking about this week anyway, which is coding for the web, the mobile web a little bit, right? So we're going to put in another meta tag. Let's do this. Meta. This time we're going to choose name as our property. Meta, name. If I press equals, if you notice, I get some other options. I want viewport as the name for the meta, right? And then I'm going to say content. That's the next property that I'm changing, or attribute. And if you notice, there's several options that Visual Studio brings up. And if you're using something like some other kind of ID, I'm not sure if you're getting the same thing, or if you've got a boilerplate that you're using that it pulls up. But I'd like you to choose width is equal to device width, initial scale is equal to 1, and I'll explain that in a second. And I want you to close off your meta tags. So those are the two meta tags that I think are super important that we're going to be using every single time. And by the way, all my tests are going to be open book, right? There's not going to be an issue of you trying to do stuff, yes?
It doesn't automatically show
View is equal to, that's okay, because your version of Visual Studio might be slightly different from mine, and I'll get you up to speed on what you should be using in a second, okay? All right, so let's look at this. So viewport, width is equal, if you can type it in as well, width is equal to device width, comma, initial dash scale is equal to 1, right? Again, what this tells the browser is, hey, take on the same width. Make sure your width for the entire browser is the same size as the viewport. Viewport means if I'm on a desktop, it's going to be the size of my desktop. If it's going to be a mobile device, it's the size of my mobile device. So it sets a property, width, to make it the device width, whatever the incoming device is. Incoming device means what device is looking at my web page. Is it a mobile device? Is it a desktop? Is it a tablet? What is it that's looking at it? Tomorrow it might be something that's in the car, right? Or your watch, right? Or you're inside your eye. You never know, right? So whatever the viewport is, the website will adjust. Initial scale means the scale of my view, right? 1 means 100%. So it's 100%. If I want to make the initial scale 0.5, that's going to mean half the size, right? And I would probably never set it that way. I would leave it like this. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about this again. It's just really these two meta tags and what they do. One is a character set that talks about the type of characters that our web page will be producing, right? And the other one is the viewport of the incoming device or computer or whatever that's looking at it. Okay, title. Let's put that. That's very important from an SEO perspective, search engine optimization, which we really maybe haven't talked about too much here. Or maybe you know about it. So I'm going to put my title of what we're doing. So it's COMP213, and it's, again, I'll say less than 8.1. Okay, so that's what our title is. So far we don't have much in terms of our body, and I'm going to show you some stuff, and I highly recommend that you do what I'm telling you. There is a great plugin for Visual Studio. Actually, let me just bring up a regular version of Chrome for a second. And it's called Visual Studio Web Essentials. If you go to vswebessentials.com, which is right here, it gives you this amazing set of tools for Visual Studio that helps you with web programming, right? Now, Visual Studio is the IDE of choice for enterprise. So when we program stuff, in enterprise, and I work with the government of Ontario frequently and other places, we use Visual Studio for a lot of the stuff we do, right? One of the greatest plugins that they have that they've come out with for Visual Studio 2013, 2012, and 2010, and now 2015, although I don't recommend you use Visual Studio 2015, only because it's still in a preview state, right, is this Visual Studio Web Essentials. If you click download, and if you have your own laptop, it's great, because that means it'll download, you can download it and install it. If you notice, there's different versions, right? Now, if you're using the machine in front of you, because you're not using your own laptop, that's okay, right? You can still download and install Visual Studio Web Essentials if it's not already there, right? And if you click download, it'll install Web Essentials, right, into your machine. And it'll be a bit of a build, and it'll ask you to reset or restart your Visual Studio, right? So I highly recommend you do that. Now, in order for you to download, if I click download, look what it says here. It says Web Essentials 2013 for update 4. That's the minimum update level that you need. So if your Visual Studio doesn't have update 4, what you may need to do is update it to Visual Studio 2013 with update 4. I think update 5 is out now too. So that's okay. Anything greater than update 4 will take, right? And then Web Essentials 2013 is what we want to put in. Why Web Essentials? Why am I telling you to do this anyway? Am I wasting your time? Absolutely not. Let me show you what it's able to do while you guys are doing the download. If you want to do the download now, go ahead, if you can. So here's the stuff that it does for us. It adds all this other functionality. Like, for example, HTML5. If I go to HTML, one of the things it does for us, it does things like, if I hover over images, it'll give me a preview of what the image will look like. It'll actually allow me to minify my files within Visual Studio, right, and so on. And the best section is this one, Zen Coding, which I hope you'll all use. Here's an example of Zen Coding for you. Watch me. Okay, so I want to create a new div tag, right? And a div tag, is a section tag, right? All it does is it sections off our work, and it creates containers for us to be able to do to use CSS on, right? So think about this as a container. So here's my div tag. Watch this. So I have a div with a class of header, let's say. Look at my code here. Div.header, right? And if I press dash, watch what it does. Bam, right? It actually creates the div and with a class of header. I don't have to actually type the word class. Well, this is cool, right? I like this a lot, right? But you know what? This is okay, but what if I want to do this? Div header, and inside of it, greater than, use a greater than sign for the shortcut. Inside of it, I want to put an h1 tag, right? Which is my header tag. And inside of that, I want to have a paragraph tag. And inside my paragraph tag, I want Lorem Pixel text for placeholder, right? And now, let me press that in. Watch my code here. This is shorthand that Visual Studio gives me. Watch. Bam. Right? So, it gave me instant content right away. Now, we use this Zen coding, if you will, for Visual Studio to create placeholder images and placeholder text. If I was to run this thing, it won't work for you unless you have Visual Studio Web Essentials installed, right? If you're using another IDE, like, for example, brackets, it's called Emmet, and you can also download Emmet for other IDEs. So for example, if I was going to look at to do this in your IDE of choice, I would look up Emmet. That's the kind of open source version, right? If I click download, it supports all these different kinds of IDEs. So Sublime Text, TextMate, Brackets, NetBeans, if you're into NetBeans, and so on. Eclipse, Tana, Espresso, and so on. It does all these different things. I highly recommend Emmet. It's a great little tool for us to do shortcuts when we type our HTML5. And for me, for my classes, because we have limited time together, I'm going to be using Zen Coding, which is really Emmet in a nutshell. So that way we can kind of quickly move through our examples, okay? As opposed to doing things by hand, step by step. So Adobe Dreamweaver definitely supports that as well. And if I look at some of these popular IDEs or editors, again, if you notice Sublime Text and Brackets, a couple of my favorites. I've tried Coda on the Mac, not really a big fan. I can use that in NetBeans for other things, like for example Java, but I'm not a fan of that in producing web pages. Eclipse Tana, another popular choice for open source. It's okay again, and I was using that for a long time until I moved to Brackets and Sublime. And again, I recommend Brackets and Sublime if you're going to go open source compared to the other ones. There's just a lot of support out there, and a lot of the examples online use Brackets and Sublime if you're going to do open source stuff. Dreamweaver is great, and it used to really be awesome when you know, maybe 10 years ago, right? And as we move forward and we came into Adobe CC, it's kind of like the Cadillac of creating web pages from a designer perspective. If you're a web designer, then Adobe Dreamweaver might be for you. Unfortunately for Dreamweaver, when it comes to some of this stuff, it's slightly behind, I think, in my perspective, other editors like Visual Studio and even Sublime Text and Brackets from a overall code hinting perspective. You can get a lot of plugins for Adobe Dreamweaver, and there's a bit of a cost. You have to pay, you know, Adobe CC costs students around $30 a month. So to me, I'm not sure that I would go with something like this right now if you're just learning and if you're not going to be dedicated to web design. I think you're probably best choosing one of the, you know, kind of open source or free editors. Notepad++, again, another popular choice. Not really personally what I like, but I recommend these two. So Emmet's available. Emmet, this shortcut, is available for all this kind of stuff. And what we're using for Visual Studio is this thing called Zen Coding, which is the Visual Studio or Microsoft version. If I click on Zen Coding and try and figure out what this stuff is, I can read about the syntax, and it gives you a reference on how this all works. So for example, if I use this hashtag, it creates an ID attribute. If I use a dot, it creates the class attribute. If I use these brackets, I can make a custom attribute. If I use the greater than sign, it creates a child element, like we talked about before, and so on. And I think it's a really great learning tool, because the stuff you do here in Zen Coding, when you get into things like, in the future, you're going to use things like jQuery or JavaScript or whatever, the same kind of way we query web pages is the same kind of syntax that Emmet and Zen Coding use. So highly recommend learning this shorthand. It makes your web design a lot quicker, especially when it comes to populating pages with you know, a default or placeholder text and values. Another one that it comes with, that's why I recommend Visual Studio Web Essentials, is the Lorem Pixel generator. Lorem Pixel generates placeholder images. So let's take a look at that. So if I want to create, so here I've got my div tag which is a header, and in my header I have an h1 tag. Let me just go back. I'll just undo all this stuff. This isn't right, because I got my h1 tag, and underneath my h1 tag I want to have a title. I want to kind of put my title in. So let's say, you know, we're going to do a new hello world. I'm going to put my brackets in here, and if you've got, the only way this is going to work, by the way, if you've got Visual Studio Web Essentials, or if you're using Emmet. All right, so I say hello world. Here's my hello world, right? And then underneath that, right? So, but the same level, it's not an h1 tag. It's not inside the h1 tag. Anything that's inside another tag, a child element, you use a greater than sign. If it's the same level, you use a plus. All right? So if I want to make a paragraph tag that's the same level, I can do that. Now, in the child of my paragraph tag is going to be my placeholder text, right? So I'm going to use my lorem. That's what it's lorem ipsum text, let's say with 50 characters for my paragraph, right? And if I press tab now, if you notice, it's the right way, right? So here's my div tag with a class of header, my h1 tag with a hello world, my paragraph tag with some default text, and if I run this thing, and I'm going to go up here where it says Google Chrome in your Visual Studio, there's different modes you can do this in, okay? You can go to, if I go to debug, if you give me a second for this opens, there's two ways I can run this. I can press F5 on the Windows machine to start debugging, or I can go Control F5 to start without debugging. Both versions work well. I always start with debugging, so I just press this little play button here. And when I do that, it's going to run Internet Information Server, the Express or IIS Express in the background, right? Which is a little web server in the background. And then I have my hello world, right? So there's my hello world with a bit of placeholder text. Are you with me? Okay, so it's easier for you to download and install Visual Studio Web Essentials than actually put this in yourself, because it's much faster. I can code way faster with it than without it. Okay. I'm just going to minimize this for a second, and I'm going to add in another div section. So I've got my header, and let's say I make another div tag with a class of content, right, as an example. And inside my content div tag, I'm going to put in a couple of another header, a subheader, right, which is that h2 tag, right? And my h2 tag is going to say, you know, let's say first content section, right? So it's inside my h2 tag, and again, you can interpret this both ways. Inside my h2 tag, I'm good, but beside it, I want to put another paragraph tag, right? And inside my paragraph tag is going to be some more lorem ipsum text, let's say as an example, just to fill up our stuff. So we'll say lorem 100. All right, there we go. I'm going to stop debugging here for a second so you can see that. I'm just going to unpin this one so you can see the full length of my screen. Okay, so I got a couple things here. If you were going to just follow along without using Emmet or without using Zen coding, this is what you would have to put in. Good luck trying to catch up. I'm challenging you guys because you know what? This is why we do this quick development stuff. I'm laying out a page. I need some placeholder images and so on to do that. Okay, so I want to put in, after this, you know, my text and so on, I want to put in an image as an example, and I want to put it in its own div tag, right? So here's my div tag, right? I can put them in this way, like we normally type them, right? Or I want to put an image, right? So here's my div tag, and underneath my div tag, I want to put an image, which is a Lorem Pixel image. Let me go back to that to show you where I get this. So if I go back to Visual Studio, I have this Lorem Pixel generator. I can just put in something like this, pix dash the size of my image, 200 by 200 pixels, and then an image type. Like for example, business would be one. And if you actually go into Lorem Pixel, the website, let me go there for you. This is what it looks like. Again, a free website. You can also use, without using Zen coding, you can always use Lorem Pixel by referring to these web links. Actually, I find this is a great little website for placeholder images, right? And if you look here, you have things like abstract, animals, food, nature, and if you click on one, like cats, let's say you're a cats person, and I want to have a color image. Here's my color image, and this is what it would look like, cats, random cats image. And again, all we're doing is we're creating placeholder images so that way we can create our website, lay it out. Well, 640 by 480 is quite a big image, but let's say I want to do something like, I don't know, I want to dial it down to 300. I'm going to type this in here. So say like, let's say 300 by 300. And again, I'm on the lorempixel.com website. 300 by 300, I want to have a color image. I click on color image, and all of a sudden it gives me a color image, another cat, right? What's 300 by 300? Well, this is great, and it gives you the examples of what to grab, right? How to grab the dummy image. For example, if once I click on this, it gives me kind of what it would look like, right? I can grab that image and drag and drop it into my page. However, the best way to do it is what I'm going to show you right now. So again, it's Lorem Pixel, right? So if I was going to go back out to this page, this is the way it works. Pix dash, this is the way the shorthand. Pix dash, whatever the size is, dash animals, or dash cats, in my particular example. So let's do that. So I've got a div tag with a Pix image that's 300 by 300, and I want cats. Right? If I did this correctly, let's just make sure that I've done it right. Pix 200 by 200 cats. Right? Here it is. And if I press dash, then I've got my link. It provides me right away an image link. Right? This is what it looks like. And if I run this web page now, I should get a little cat on the bottom, right, of my image really, really quickly. Right? Why would we do this? Because cats may not be important to you, right? It's not for the cat, okay? Save the cat. Save the cat. No, it's not for the cat. It's because you want to create placeholder images when you're laying out your pages, right? Because maybe you don't have the right image at the beginning, right? But you want to create something for your client to lay something out for them so that they see images and so on in the right order. Okay, cool. So cats. And if you want to change this up, let's say as an example, and you don't want to have cats, you want to have something else, like cats aren't good. You're creating something for business. I just see this link right here. I can change it and I can call it business. Right? And if you notice there's business 1, I've just changed the number and it gives you a preview of what it's going to look like. So if I refresh my page, it'll pull it up and there's my business. If I don't like this link, like if I don't like number 1, this is business 1, just as a placeholder text because I think it's ugly, I can go to business 2. Choose a different image as a default, right? That's better, right? So again, some placeholder images, random, you can also make it random, they come up. And again, all it does is it kind of produces an image that's hanging out for us to use so we can apply our CSS rules and start laying things out. Okay, well this is good. I've got a body. I've got in my body a header with a paragraph tag. I'm not really happy with that paragraph tag right now. But let's leave it alone for now. I've got a div tag with content, right? And in here I have an h2 tag, so a second headline tag, another paragraph tag right here with a bunch of lorem text, and I've got a div tag, and all it has inside the div tag is this one image, right? Well, this is cool, right? But let's say I want to create, and this I'm just going over Zen coding for a second. I'm just going to undo all these changes for a second. And this is the great thing about Zen coding as well. If you can undo to here, right? So that didn't work out. I know I don't want cats. I want business, right? That's what I want in there. That's cool. But what I also want is I want this business stuff. I'm just going to skip down here for a second. I want this business stuff to come into a bunch of links. So instead of one, I want a grid of images, right? So let's start off with an unordered list. So a UL tag. Inside the unordered list, I love when they call me when I'm working. It's fantastic. Inside of my unordered list, I want you to put in an LI tag, right? A list item, right? And inside my list item, I want to put this stuff, right? So I'm going to just cut this out, put it here, right? And then press tab. Watch. Here's an unordered list with list item and an LI tag, right? Well, this is nice. Once I have this, I can copy this and paste, right? You'd say that you'd probably be thinking that maybe I can make a bunch of images like that, right? Kind of 300 by 300. Well, this is cool, but wouldn't it be great if I could say I want 5 LI tags, 6 LI tags, whatever. But let's go back to that documentation here. So if I go back to Zen coding, right? Here's my Zen coding. And if I click on read more about Zen coding syntax, right? It's going to take me back to this page. And if you notice, it gives us some examples. Here's our UL tag, right? And here's an example of what it does. Here's my UL. I created a custom attribute called dataBind, right? And with a custom attribute value for each customers. And then an LI, oh, there it is, times 4. That means 4 LI tags with a span that's inside of it. Each one has a span tag with a caption whatever the caption is going to be called, right? Here's my caption 1, 2, 3, $, plus on the same level, right? An input tag, right? And so on. That's how it works. Zen coding is kind of it compiles one tag to the other, and it's a good, nice little shortcut for us to create custom web pages quickly. Let's go back. So that means that if I want this, but I want 4 or 5 li tags, let's go back. So let's undo, right? Back to this. I want my one tag, li, let's say I want 5 li tags, right? And if I press tab, I get my 5 li tags right away, right? So I can do my list items really, really quickly, as opposed to one at a time. Now I've got the same picture over and over again. I could certainly put in different pictures, like for example, picture 2, I like picture 4, maybe picture 3, and maybe picture 5 and 7, because I like those standard kind of pictures in there, right? And I'll save and I'll refresh my screen, and now I'm going to get a bunch of pictures here in an li tag that come from that Lorem Pixel website as stand and or placeholder images that are going to come across. Okay, cool. Now if you notice, this page is completely unstyled, right? We're going to style this page up today. That's one of the second part of what we're going to do, right? Okay, cool. So I got my business pictures that I have. I want to put this into like a a grid. For now, 5 seems to be a lot, but I may want to change the size of my pictures, right? Ooh, that means I have to target each of my list items, right? And if I'm going to do that, right, then I got to think about what am I going to be styling? My unordered list or my list items? What level do I want to style? Is it the list items that I want to check? And is it the image that's in the list item? Right? Because remember, the CSS stands for a cascading style sheet, right? So if I want to target this list item, this image tag, and then the source of my images is right here, right? As an example, I can move down the list. I can say all div tags that have ULs, that have LIs, that have images, or I can say an LI with an image tag with an ID of or a class of whatever it's going to be, right? Short image or whatever it's going to be, right? We'll do it both ways. Okay, so I've got my little list, and now I need my footer. So let's do that. So I'm going to put a div tag with a class of footer, right? And inside my footer tag is going to be an h4 tag, right? And inside my h4 tag is going to be a copyright text. You guys have learned this. And copy, right? And, my company, Inc., right? And then maybe 2015. Right, which we can actually put in something else as well. So I've got this, but this and COMP213 Inc., right? I want to put this inside my little brackets because that's what I want to be output, right? There's this thing that didn't quite control nicely. That actually failed. And copy. There we go. That's what it should look like, right? So here's my footer. So let's refresh this page and see what it looks like now. So I've got my hello world, I've got my first stuff. Way down here I've got my little copyright, my copy Inc., my company Inc. 2015, right? And I don't have any other pages, so I don't have any navigation, which we'll kind of add in later on from a navigation perspective, right? But for now I've got all these images, and I've got no styling. My page is completely unstyled. All right, but if you notice, let's take a look at this page really quickly. I'm going to zoom in here. I want you to tell me. So we've got no styling, but we got a problem, right? Do we have a space up here, right? How does my page spaced up here, right? This is weird. And look, I've got this little bit of pixels on the left-hand side. If I've got no styling, shouldn't my page be directly on the margin, right? And way at the top, like in the bottom top left corner? Well, the answer is yes, it should be, but no, it's not. Why? Because every browser has built-in styles that default style your page the way this looks right here. We want to get rid of that default style, right? That's the first thing we want to do. So we're going to do that by downloading something called reset.css. Let's find that. So I'm going to just Google Chrome it. So I'm going to say Google reset CSS, like that. It's going to take me to this place, this link, the first link. If I search for reset CSS, it's going to take me to this tool link called meyerweb.com Eric Tools CSS Reset. I want you to go there. And if you notice, there's this little website this guy put together, right? But I don't care about the website. I care about this. This is the reset CSS that I want to include, right, in my files. And what this does is it resets my CSS and removes all browser specific CSS so that every browser you look at, whether it's Opera, Internet Explorer, Chrome, or whatever, resets their styles, right? So it says grab a copy of the file here, and the way we do that is where it says grab a copy of the file here, I'm going to right click, right, and I'm going to save my link as, right, and if you notice it says reset.css, right, I'm going to put this in my downloads. You can put this where you like. I'm going to put this in my downloads. Here it is, reset CSS, and save. Okay, save my file. Now I need to include my CSS file. I'm going to stop debugging because I can't include anything. I'm going to go back to Solution Explorer and pin it back on. And if you notice, my solution is only includes my index HTML, right? And I've got a couple of other configuration files which you normally wouldn't have. Again, I'm in Visual Studio 2013. That's what we're using, right? I'm going to right-click on my project, right? Because again, semantic HTML rules from now on. I want you guys to take this on, whether using that ID or my ID or whatever ID you want to choose. Your files should be in their own folder, right? So in other words, the images, your assets, your sounds, all that kind of stuff is in their own folder. Your CSS in its own folder. Your JavaScripts and all that stuff in their own folder. You don't put them on the root. That's bad practice. So how do we do that? We're going to right click on my project. I'm going to go add, and I'm going to go new folder, right? And this new folder I'm going to rename CSS. I could name it, or content. I'd like to just stick with what we know, so it's going to be called CSS right now. Okay, and now because I know that I downloaded my reset CSS, it's inside my downloads, and I've got a bunch of other junk in my downloads, right? I'm going to go into to find my file, my reset CSS, and somewhere there we go. I'm going to drag and drop my reset CSS into CSS. That's how you have to do it with Visual Studio. Drag and drop. It's got to be not debugging, and if you notice now it's in there. All right, so CSS folder, reset CSS. Let's do that again. I'm just going to delete that and show you that again one more time. So I'm going to go into the file, the place where I have it. Here's my reset CSS, and I'm going to drag and drop it while this Windows Explorer is open. I have to have that open and Visual Studio, right, where my Windows Explorer is on top. I'm going to drag my reset CSS file into my new CSS folder. When I've got that, I have this. Are you with me? If you're not, it's okay. You need to put it in here. The other way to do it is you can add an existing item. So you can go right-click. I can add an existing item, and I can kind of hunt for it by going to Downloads, and then going to a Reset CSS. I can go down to where my Reset CSS is, which is here, and press Add. That's the other way to do it. Okay. Okay. So now that I have my Reset CSS, I want to add my CSS file into my folder. Where do I add it? I can drag and drop, but where do I add this thing into my folder? Where in my document do I add this stuff? My reset CSS? In the header, absolutely. Where in the header? Traditionally. You can put it anywhere, but where do you want to put it? You can put it in the last line, but I recommend it underneath the title for sure, right? Just from a standards perspective, right? So how do you do that? Drag and drop, just like you would in Expression Web, and it adds the line into your file. One thing I'd like to do also is do a little bit of documentation. Have you guys done any comments in your HTML before? Is that a yes? This is what I want you to do. So I want you to put in a comment, right? That kind of puts in like CSS section. Oops. Okay, this is my CSS section. Because I mean, I might have more than just one CSS file, right? I might have my own CSS too. This is the reset CSS. So once I include a file, a CSS file in my document, the browser will read the document line by line. That's what it does. So it looks at line 1 and it goes, here's my doc type. Looks at line 2, okay, here's my opening HTML tag. Here's my line 3, oh, here's my header. Here's a couple of meta tags. Okay, here's my title. Here's a comment that I'm going to ignore, right? Oh, wait, now this link tells me I have to include whatever's in the style sheet, which is over here. Let me just double click this. This is the style sheet that I just downloaded, right? Everything that's in the style sheet, I'm going to include in my file. Right here, right now, when I get to this header. Okay, let's save everything and then run it and see what we get. Okay, cool. Now look at the words. There's no styling whatsoever. See how it's right to the corner, it's hugged to the corner, and there's no styling at all? That's because we've removed all of our browser styling, our default browser styling that comes with Chrome. It'll come with everything that you do. So if you want your web pages to look exactly the same from browser to browser, or at least try to anyway, because even every browser is slightly different anyway, the best thing to do is reset your CSS by using this reset CSS methodology. Okay, so I've got no styling whatsoever here that's being imposed on my page by the browser. Okay, that's why my hello world now is way over here. Now this gives us the onus on us to decide our styling for all of our tags. I got to design my styling for my H1 tag, my H2 tags, and be very specific for all of our tags, what our sizes are going to be, the font family, all that stuff, which is super really important practice. Now, where would I put this stuff? Well, I'm going to put it into my own CSS file. So if I go back to to Solution Explorer, I have reset.css in here. I'm going to right click, do it with me. I'm going to go add, and I'm going to go new style sheet, right? Style sheet. And the style sheet, I'm going to call this thing probably something like main, right? Or styles, or whatever you like for your app, your web app. I'm just calling it mine main. Press OK. And I've got my new empty style sheet that I can use, right? Now I haven't included it in my file yet, and the way to do that, of course, is go back to index.html and drag and drop my main.css below my reset CSS. Because remember, it's a cascade, so it happens in order. So we first hit the first CSS file, and then the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth in order. It means if I put my main CSS above it, right, that means it's all going to be reset afterwards. That's bad. That means every change that I make, it's gone, right? We don't want that. We want to put our main CSS here, right? Okay, cool. So that's the first thing. And then what we want to try and do is we want to try and style our body, with some basic stylings, right? So example, we want to define our font family as an example, right? So let's do that. So in our body tag, I want to start typing, and this is where I'm going to make it a little bigger for you guys to see. Here's our great thing about IntelliSense with Visual Studio. I'm going to start typing font, and if you notice, it shows me the first thing, which is font family, right? So here's my font family, right? And if I press colon, it gives me a suggestion of font families, right? So which one do I want? Well, I definitely don't want some kind of Times New Roman serif font. Those serif fonts are passé, right? I want something like a Helvetica, a Nui, something like that, or some kind of Arial sans serif font. So this one would be fine. This first one, Franklin Gothic medium, Arial narrow, that's okay. Or a Lucida sans, one of those. And you can also choose other ones. There's tons. Depending on what I have in, I have quite a few fonts as a selection that you can choose. All right, so there's tons and tons. You may not have the same ones as me, right? It's a standard set of selections, but I want you to choose one of them for yourself, right? Again, I recommend a sans serif, so one that doesn't have any serifs. So what are serifs anyway? Do you know what a serif is? The curlies, right? Get those curlies away because they're not as popular. I'm just going to choose Tahoma, Geneva, Verdana, sans serif, this one here. So that's the first one. If you notice, I just double click. I don't have to remember typing this in. I don't even recommend you remember typing it in, because you know what? You're not going to be able to remember everything. You're going to go from C#, you're going to program, you're going to go and do CSS, you're going to do HTML5, you're going to do JavaScript. There's no way you can remember everything. And I'm one of these people that says, let your IntelliSense help you out. Let your code hinting make your web apps in a rapid application development kind of way, right? As opposed to you trying to remember everything, and things change so often. Okay, so font family is the first thing. I think the next thing we want to kind of is our standard font size. So here's our font size. Now we can give it in pixels. If we say our standard font size is this many pixels, or I could say small, medium, large. There's also some standards, right? And if I hover over the image, if I go to medium, right, it gives me all these different options, right? For example, I could also choose a number of pixels, or ems, right, which we'll go back to in a second. So I think our standard font size should be something like 12 pixels, right? So 12 pixels, right? So font size, font family, that's really important. These are standard stuff. So this is like every font, everything you put in any H1 tag, standard ways, this is just 12 pixels, right? If I type font again, there's other options here. Font size adjust, font style, as an example, font variant, and whatever. The other one I want you to put in, if I start typing line, right? Our line height is probably really, really important as well. Like some kind of line height. I should probably specify a line height. And if I press colon, it gives you an example of line height and how many pixels, right? This is the line height of each of your lines that physically appears in the body of your document, right? So I'm going to put my line height as something like 15 pixels, right? You can choose whatever you want, right? As long as it's not lower than 12, because that means your lines will overlap, right? Okay, so there's my line height. What other things do I need, right? Well, for now, I think this is kind of cool. Let's start with this. And let's see what's going to happen if with just these little changes to our body tag, right? So our entire body, that means everything in my document, the minimum will be here. And this is why this body tag is positioned here in our cascade, right? It happens before everything else. So that way, if I add stuff underneath it, like for example, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, right? I want them to have a specific way of looking at things. Like for example, let's say our H1 tag, our H2, and all of our H tags, we want a slightly different font than our Tahoma, Geneva, Verdana, Sans Serif font, right? All of them just have a different font type. We can choose that. Let's run it the way it is now for now, though. Let's see what happens. Okay. If you notice, it's quite small now. So 12, if you were going to choose 12, that type is really small, right? In fact, if anything, in this modern web, I think it's way too small, right? So I think as a default, and again, I've reset my fonts so that it's reset my CSS, so that's why I have it way over here. But I think this font in general, like 12, I've chosen 12, is way too small. So let's make it something a little bit bigger. Let's make it like 20. So every font, the minimum size is 20, right? And let's make it our line height like 25. Let's give it a few more pixels of on either side, right? And if I was to refresh this page now the way it is, right? If you notice now it's a little better, right? So it's 25 pixels, right? And our line height, if you notice, there's enough space between each one, right? Of how many pixels per, that kind of divide our lines. I would say this is kind of cool. And if I wanted to find a different font, or let's say I say, well, every one of my header documents, my headlines, H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, I want them all bold, right? I can do that, right? By deciding that. So I can say like, well, all of my header tags, so H1, comma, H2, H3, H4, H5, let's keep going, H6. And if you don't remember how many there are, go to reset.csx, and if you notice, it goes from H1 to H6, right? H1 to H6, right? And then for each of those header tags, I want the weight of my font. If I can do a couple of things. I can say, if I say font dash, and if I want styling, you guys with me still, or are you guys doing something else? So font dash weight. If I go font dash weight, right? If you notice, it's font dash weight is equal to bold. I can also choose another weight. Font dash weight I know because that's I can make it so it's bold. So all of my all my headers, every one of them, regardless of size, they're all bold, right? That's what it does because I'm not specifying, size right now. I'm just specifying that all my headers are bold, right? Headlines. If I go back and I refresh my page, now my headlines are bold, right? And if I want space between each of my paragraph tags, right? We're going to be talking about the box model in a bit. But if I want to give space to my paragraph tags or margins to my body tag, let's say for example my entire all of my my document, I want to give it a margin, both right side and left side, right, of about 10 pixels. Or actually I want 10 pixels all around. Well, the best place for that would be probably a body tag, right? So I can say something like margin, right? And now if I want to talk about margin top or margin left, I can press a dash, margin left, and I can kind of put in 10 pixels, right? Margin dash right, let's say 10 pixels. I can do whatever I want here. Margin dash top, right? 10 pixels. And you get again this margin dash bottom, right? 10 pixels. Okay, this is cool. Margins, right? Around my entire document, right? Well, that's my body tag. That means every element has a what I'm gonna call it, 10 pixels margin. Let's just see that for a second. So if I refresh and if I go down, if you notice, there's a nice little border now, 10 pixels around my entire document, even on the bottom and on the left, right? That's what this whole thing, this little border, this little 10 pixel separation between the top, right? That's what this thing does. Okay, well this is cool, but you probably, did you learn the shorthand for this? You guys are shaking your head going, Tom, I don't know what you're talking, right? All right, so you're gonna go like this. Instead of margin all this stuff, you're gonna do this. Margin, right? And I'm gonna start doing this, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, right? That's one way of doing it. That's the same. So if I save that and I refresh, right? Gives me the same result, see? 10 pixels everywhere, right? However, there's even a shorter one. If I know that everything is going to be 10 pixels, I can just do one of these, right? 10 pixels. So everything is 10 pixels, right? So if I go here and I refresh, no difference, right? How about if I want the top and the bottom, right, to be like, I want 15 pixels on the top and 15 pixels on the bottom, and then 10 pixels on the, or let's say 30 pixels on the left, and 20 pixels on the right. How do I do that? Well, it goes in this top, right, bottom, left kind of order. So if I was going to do this, it would be top, let's say 10 pixels on the top, let's say 15 pixels on the right, let's say 30 pixels on the bottom, and let's say to be extreme, 60 pixels on the left, right? Let's see what happens now. So let's take a look at this and refresh, right? 60 pixels on the left, right? So it goes top, right, bottom with 30 pixels, a little bit more, and on the left you've got this 60 pixels, right? All it does is pixels are a unit of measure that slices up the screen depending on what your resolution is. And right now my resolution by default is the whole size of my screen. So if you notice, it just reflashes everything to the size of my screen because of, why it's doing this? Because I've got in my index.html, it reflows because I've got this in my meta tag. My meta tag is width is equal to device width, initial scale is equal to 1. So it reflows my text a little bit differently than you may have seen it in before, right? So it fits inside here. It has the whole text fitting in here, right? Inside my document, whatever size my document is. If it's this wide or if it's this wide, it doesn't matter. It reflows my text. That's the first thing I want to do. So this is kind of a big one. I don't think I need that much margin, but maybe, I want to go back to my main.css and change this back into something that's more reasonable. I definitely do want my right and left to be different than my top and bottom, right? So let's say, for example, my top, it's okay to be 20. I don't mind my top. And my bottom can be 20 as well. So 20, 20. And then maybe my left and right, I want it to be like 30 or 40. Let's say 40. Right? A little bit of a margin on the right. Well, hold on. Don't you see a pattern? 20, 40, 20, 40. Oh. Okay, so let's try that first. There's a pattern. Oh, not 640. Ooh, that's wrong. That'd be bad. We don't want 640. For 640, we'll never see the left. We'd go woo all the way to the right. It'd be way over there. All right, let's try this out. So if I refresh, there's some adjustments. I've adjusted my top, right? Top, right, bottom, left. That's how it goes. Top, right, bottom, left in that circle. That's the order that we do our margins, right? Actually, that's the order we're going to do our padding too in a second when I talk about the box model. Okay. You could do all those things, but auto means that it, yes. Top, right, bottom, left. Top, right, bottom, left. We'll talk about that later on. But I want to give you a bit of a preview. Sorry? I could delete this half because of the pattern, right? Top, right, This one here is top and bottom, right, and left, right? That's what this is. It could be that too. So if I delete this and go here and refresh on my page and refresh this, no change, right? So again, there's a bunch of shortcuts I want you to remember for today. Margin, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about in our box model, right? It's the space around the object, right? Not within. So my container, we're going to draw this out later on. The container is a box, and inside our box, you have some spacing in the box. You have some spacing outside of the box. This is spacing that's outside of the box, right? Which we're going to talk about. So margin is spacing in the box. Okay, cool. So our body has that 20 and 40. This is okay for us to leave it like that. And I think what I want to do is, we're kind of a little bit more than halfway because I started a little late. I want to kind of pause it there, take a 10-minute break. I'll go around, make sure you guys are okay, and we'll start up with our second part of our movie after this. Right? So I'm just going to go here and pause the movie.